Once you begin to think critically about religion in general, there's a common question that you'll probably end up asking. Why do so many people cling to divine covenants that can't be proven? Well, the short answer is this. They do it because supernatural certainty feels safer than real-life ambiguity. But is it really? Let's spend some time exploring why humans crave divine promises, how covenants become tools of control, and what it means to live without guarantees. Welcome to another bonus edition of the MTB Podcast, a segment of the weekly episode that I call Afterthoughts. This is my favorite part of these weekly presentations because it gives me a chance to dig a little deeper into something that came up during the main presentation. So let's start with this word covenant. In the Bible, a covenant is basically a binding agreement between God and God's chosen people. Think of it like a contract, except instead of signing with a pen, you're signing with promises, rituals, and sometimes a whole lot of animal sacrifices. It's a deal. We'll follow your rules, God, and you'll bless us with land, prosperity, and protection. On paper, it sounds pretty straightforward. But here's the pattern that plays out over and over again. The people break the covenant. God withholds the reward, and somehow the people always take the blame. It's never, hey, maybe God didn't hold up his end of the bargain. Nope, it's always, well, we must have failed. We messed up again. Imagine being in a contract where the other party never delivers, but you're the one apologizing and scrambling to make it right. Honestly, if it were a cell phone plan, you'd have switched providers a long time ago. And then the New Testament comes along and moves the goalposts. Now the covenant is still there, but the reward isn't land or prosperity in this life. You know, things that you could measure. It's eternal happiness in an afterlife that no one can prove or even explain in detail. That's convenient, isn't it? You can't exactly file a customer complaint if the reward doesn't show up after you die. So you end up with this cosmic contract where the payoff is beyond your reach while you're alive. Which brings us to the big question, why? Why are so many intelligent, well-educated people willing to buy into a contract they can never actually see fulfilled? What is it about this idea of a covenant that has kept billions of people locked in for thousands of years? That's what I want us to wrestle with tonight. Not to mock or belittle anyone, but to really explore what's happening in the human mind and heart that makes this so compelling. Here's the thing. Humans really don't like uncertainty. We're just not wired for it. Our brains crave patterns and guarantees. If you've ever sat in traffic and thought, if I take this side street, maybe I'll save 5 minutes, that's your brain trying to predict and control. Or if you've ever refreshed the tracking link on a package 3 times in 1 hour, you know what I'm talking about. We don't do well with maybe. We want to know. We want rules, timelines, and outcomes we can count on. We want control. That's part of why a covenant with God is so appealing. It's sort of the ultimate safety net. If I do X, God will do Y. Follow the rules and you'll be blessed. Break them and, well, things won't go so well. It's like a cosmic contract. We see the same impulse in everyday life. We sign job contracts, right? Do the work, get the paycheck. We sign mortgages, make the payments, keep the house. We even sign marriage vows. Okay, that one's a little more complicated, but you get the point. We like knowing the rules of the game. Religion takes that basic human impulse and raises the stakes to encompass eternity. But there's a trap. Life doesn't actually work like that. People get sick, jobs disappear, accidents happen, injustice runs rampant. Life doesn't deliver what the covenant promises. And when that happens, the believer, they can't exactly blame God, so they blame themselves. Or worse, they blame all the sinners around them. Things would be fine if everyone else just followed the rules, my rules that I agreed to with God. So now the covenant has created this cycle of guilt, blame, and dependence. You didn't get that blessing? Must be your fault. Your community is struggling? Must be the fault of all those people over there. And the cycle sticks because certainty feels so much safer than ambiguity. Believing you know the rules, even if the rules are impossible, still feels easier than facing the messiness of real life. Honestly, ambiguity is terrifying for most people. Right? Maybe you'll get the job, maybe you won't. Maybe this relationship will last, maybe it won't. Maybe things will work out, maybe they won't. It is incredibly stressful. Who wants to live with that constant uncertainty? So we build contracts, covenants, and cosmic promises, not because they're true, but because they're comforting. Now here's where things take a darker turn. This very human longing for certainty doesn't just show up in personal faith. It gets hijacked, culturally and politically. Leaders figure out pretty quickly that if people crave guarantees, you can sell them one. And nothing says guarantee like claiming to speak for God. All you have to do is hold up the idea of a divine covenant, and suddenly you're not just a politician or a preacher, you're the spokesperson for heaven's contract department. That's exactly what we see in Christian nationalism. The claim is that America itself is in a covenant with God. When the nation sins, punishment follows. And natural disasters, economic downturns, social unrest. And when leaders enforce God's rules, blessings are supposed to flow. Prosperity, peace, maybe even a really good stock market. It's like a cosmic carrot and stick routine. Follow the covenant, get the treat. Break it, you get smacked. But notice the sleight of hand here. It's no longer about humility or kindness or lifting each other up. It's about fear, judgment, and control. Do this or else. The covenant, which was originally supposed to be a relationship between humans and the divine, becomes a weapon for enforcing political agendas. Instead of mercy and love, we get punishment and power plays. And people lap it up because, again, it offers certainty. The comforting illusion that if you just follow the rules, their rules, everything will be okay. And here's the kicker. When outsiders question this whole setup, the response isn't dialogue. It's not, interesting point. Let's talk about it. No, critics are labeled as the enemy. In fact, many fundamentalist Christians view people like me as demonic. Why? Because questioning the covenant means I must be evil. And questioning the covenant feels like we're trying to pull the rug out from under their entire worldview. If you've built your sense of safety and order on the idea of this cosmic covenant, then anyone who pokes holes in that contract doesn't just disagree with you, they threaten your entire foundation. It's not just uncomfortable. It feels dangerous to them. So what do we do with all of this? And I don't mean do this as in a homework assignment or a challenge for the week. I mean do this in the sense of thinking differently. Because sometimes a shift in perspective is what we really need. One way to think about it is this. The covenant is a human invention. It's a coping mechanism for uncertainty. It's a way of saying, if I follow the rules, I'll be safe. When we see it that way, It becomes a little easier to understand why people cling to it so fiercely. Who wouldn't want a cosmic contract that makes sense of a chaotic world? It's like having insurance for your soul. If you believe in souls and not just consciousness and self-awareness. And sure, that insurance is expensive, it's complicated, and you're never really sure what's covered, but you keep paying into it anyway because it feels safer than having nothing. Now, that doesn't mean we have to agree with these folks. And it definitely doesn't mean we excuse the harm that covenant thinking can cause when it gets twisted into judgment or political control. But it might help us shift our perspective from pure frustration to something at least a little closer to understanding. Instead of throwing up our hands and asking, how can intelligent people believe this bullshit? We can reframe the question. It's not about intelligence. It's about the deeper human need for certainty in an uncertain world. And maybe that's the healthier way to look at it. We don't need to accept their covenant. We don't need to sign up for the terms and conditions ourselves. But we can see it for what it is. A psychological safety net. Something that makes people feel anchored when life feels unpredictable. And while we might choose to live without that safety net, it helps to remember that letting go of it can be terrifying. Seeing that clearly doesn't solve the problem, but it can give us just a little more clarity and maybe even a little more compassion. So where does all this leave us? Well, we've taken a walk through the idea of covenant, right? First as a biblical contract, but then as a psychological safety net, and finally as a cultural and political tool. Along the way, we've seen how the promise of certainty can be comforting, but also how it can be exploited to keep people stuck in cycles of guilt, fear, and dependence. And yes, it can be frustrating to watch people, smart, well-educated people, watch them cling to something that seems so unprovable. But maybe the deeper truth is that they're not really clinging to the covenant itself. They're clinging to the certainty it represents. And that's something I think we can all relate to, right? We've all had moments when we wanted life to come with a clear set of rules, a neat contract that spelled everything out. If I do this, then I'll get that. It's comforting to believe the world works that way. The reality, of course, is that life is messier. There are no guaranteed payoffs, no divine contracts that remove all the risk. But here's the flip side. That uncertainty also gives us the room for freedom, creativity, and growth. So maybe the takeaway is this. Instead of seeing covenant thinking only as irrational or outdated, we can see it as a very human response to a very human fear. And if we can frame it that way, it becomes easier to respond. Not with mockery or despair, but with a kind of grounded compassion. We don't have to buy into their covenant, but we also don't have to let it drive us into bitterness. The fact of the matter is that none of us really know what's around the corner. What we do know is how we choose to live right now. And maybe that's the better contract to live by. Not one written on stone tablets or buried in theology textbooks, but one we make with ourselves and each other. To choose humility over arrogance. To choose mercy over judgment. To choose kindness over fear. Not because it guarantees a reward in some distant afterlife, but because it makes life richer, more meaningful, and more human right now. Honestly, that's a covenant I think is worth keeping. for joining me for this episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll also keep you updated on the weekly live streams of Mythologizing the Bible. Also, if you subscribe for free over at thecodaproject.com, you'll start receiving my weekly resource called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief, once-a-week guide on a single core value. Think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each age group. So if you're interested, go subscribe for free at thecodaproject.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, remember to question everything, keep what's good, and live what matters.